Luna didn't know that the wounded man bleeding on her healing table was the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. She didn't know that his storm-grey eyes had been searching for her across 1,000 miles, and she certainly didn't know that the moment her fingers touched his torn flesh, the golden thread she'd read about in ancient texts would snap into place between them like a second heartbeat. She only knew that he was hurt, and healing was what she did. "Hold still," she murmured, pressing clean linen against the gash across his shoulder. The wound was deep, but not mortal. A blade had caught him at an angle, slicing through muscle, but missing anything vital. Around them, the healing tent buzzed with quiet urgency as Luna's assistant tended to 3 other injured men brought in from the border skirmish. The stranger beneath her hands didn't flinch as she cleaned the wound, though she felt the tension coiled in his powerful frame. Most men twice his size would have been crying out by now. Instead, he watched her with an intensity that made something flutter nervously in her chest. "You're lucky," she said, focusing on threading her needle. "Another inch to the left, and this would have been much worse." "Lucky," he repeated, his voice rough velvet in the lamplight. "Yes, I think I am." Something in his tone made her glance up. Those storm-coloured eyes were fixed on her face with a focus that stole her breath, not leering or demanding like so many men who came through her tent, but searching, as if he were trying to memorize every detail. Heat crept up her neck. Luna ducked her head and returned to her work. She'd learned long ago not to encourage attention from men. Nothing good ever came of it. The first stitch went in clean and precise. The moment her skin touched his again, warmth shot up her arm like lightning, spreading through her chest and settling somewhere behind her sternum. She nearly dropped the needle. "Are you all right?" His hand moved as if to steady her, then stopped short of touching. "Fine," she managed, though her voice came out breathier than intended. "Just tired. It's been a long day." A long 5 years, more like, ever since the night she'd lost everything. Luna pushed the memory away and focused on the careful work of closing his wound. In and out, each stitch neat and even. She'd done this hundreds of times before, thousands maybe. It should have been routine, but nothing felt routine with this man's eyes on her. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. Luna's hands stilled. She kept her gaze fixed on the wound, half finished. "Does it matter?" "Everything about you matters." The words hit her like a physical blow. Luna's breath caught, and for a moment the healing tent faded around them. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever looked at her the way he was looking at her now, as if she were precious, as if she were everything, which was impossible. She was nothing. A broken girl who'd failed to save her own family, who lived alone in the healer's cottage and spoke to no one but Patience and her assistant. She had nothing to offer a man like this, a man who radiated power and commanded attention just by breathing. "Luna," she whispered finally, then immediately regretted giving him even that much. He smiled, and the expression transformed his harsh features completely. Luna, like the moon. Just Luna. She returned to stitching, desperate to finish and get him out of her tent before she did something foolish, like ask him to stay. The warmth in her chest pulsed stronger with each heartbeat, as if something inside her were waking up after a long sleep. She'd read about this in the old texts her grandmother had left her. The bond, the golden thread that connected true mates across any distance. But that was fairy tale nonsense. Luna was too broken, too damaged, too ordinary for anything like destiny. She'd accepted that truth years ago when she'd cowered in the root cellar while rogues murdered her family upstairs. A real mate would have saved them. A real mate would have arrived in time. This was just attraction, physical chemistry, the kind of thing that led nice girls into trouble and left them pregnant and alone. There. She tied off the final stitch and reached for the healing salve. This will help with infection and speed the healing. Her fingertips brushed his skin as she smoothed the salve over the wound. The golden warmth flared so bright she gasped, jerking her hand away. He caught her wrist, his touch gentle but firm. What was that? Nothing. Luna tried to pull free, but he held her steady, not hurting, just anchoring. Probably just static from the wool blankets. Those storm eyes saw right through the lie. I felt it too. Of course he had, which meant either she was losing her mind or the impossible was happening. Luna's heart hammered against her ribs. I need to bandage this. He released her wrist without argument, but she could feel him watching as she wound clean linen around his shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied the bandage in place. "You should rest tonight," she said, stepping back to create distance between them. "Come back tomorrow so I can check for infection." He sat up slowly, testing the range of motion in his arm. The movement made the muscles of his chest shift beneath bronzed skin, and Luna forced herself to look away. She'd seen hundreds of shirtless men in her work. None of them had ever made her mouth go dry. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked. "I'm always here." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Luna busied herself cleaning her tools, not wanting to see pity in his expression. Instead, she heard the rustle of fabric as he reached for his shirt. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Luna." The way he said her name sent warmth spiraling through her again. Luna kept her back turned until she heard his footsteps moving toward the tent opening. "Wait." The word escaped before she could stop it. He paused, and she could feel his attention like a physical weight. Luna closed her eyes, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. "What's your name?" she asked without turning around. A pause, then soft as a promise. "Kieran." Just Kieran, as if he were nothing more than another injured traveller passing through her small border village. But Luna had lived on the edges of the kingdom long enough to recognise quality when she saw it. The fine wool of his travelling clothes, the excellent steel of the weapons he carried, the way he held himself like a man accustomed to command. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. "Until tomorrow, Luna." The tent flap whispered shut behind him, but the warmth in her chest remained. Luna sank onto the small stool beside her work table and buried her face in her hands. This was dangerous. Whatever this was between them, attraction, chemistry, the ridiculous possibility of a mate bond, it could only lead to heartbreak. Men like Kieran didn't end up with women like her. He'd take what he wanted and move on, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She'd been picking up pieces for 5 years. She wasn't sure she had the strength to do it again, but even as Luna told herself to be smart, to be careful, to protect what was left of her heart, she caught herself listening for his voice outside the tent, hoping he'd return with some excuse to see her again before tomorrow. The golden warmth pulsed once more behind her ribs, and Luna pressed her hand to her chest. Whatever was happening to her, whatever this connection meant, one thing was certain. She wasn't ready for it. Not even close. The days that followed were a strange rhythm Luna had never experienced before. Kieran returned the next morning, just as he'd promised. His wound was healing remarkably fast, too fast for an ordinary man. But Luna said nothing. She unwrapped the bandage with careful fingers, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened when her skin brushed his. "It looks good," she said, keeping her voice professional. "No signs of infection." "Your skill as a healer is remarkable." He watched her face as she cleaned the area with gentle strokes. "Where did you train?" Luna's hands stilled. "My grandmother, she taught me everything before she died." She didn't mention that her grandmother had also taught her about bonds and mates and the old magic that ran through certain bloodlines. Some knowledge was too dangerous to share. "She must have been proud of you," Kieran said softly. Luna shrugged, applying fresh salve. The golden warmth flared between them again, and this time she didn't jerk away. She was learning to expect it, even if she couldn't understand it. "She died when I was 16, right before—" She caught herself before mentioning the massacre. A long time ago. Kieran's expression gentled. I'm sorry for your loss. Something in his tone made her look up. There was understanding in those storm-grey eyes, the kind that only came from personal experience with grief. Luna found herself studying his face, noting the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke of burdens carried. You've lost people too, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then added, My parents, my sister, a war that should have ended years sooner than it did. The admission hung between them, creating an unexpected intimacy. Luna had spent 5 years talking to patients about their physical pain, but never about the deeper wounds that couldn't be stitched closed. I'm sorry, she whispered and meant it. It was a long time ago, but the loss, it shapes you, makes you careful about who you let close. Luna nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She finished tending his wound in comfortable silence, both lost in their own memories. The third day, he brought tea. I noticed you only drink that bitter willow bark brew, Kieran said, setting a small package on her work table. This might be more pleasant. Luna unwrapped the cloth to find quality tea leaves, the kind that cost more than she made in a month. I can't accept this. It's just tea, Luna. But it wasn't just tea, and they both knew it. It was attention, care. The kind of gesture that spoke of a man who noticed details and acted on them. Thank you, she said quietly, and was rewarded with that smile that transformed his entire face. They shared the tea while she checked his shoulder. The wound was nearly healed now, just a thin pink line where the blade had cut. By all rights he should stop coming. There was no medical reason for daily visits, yet he kept returning, always with some excuse. His arm was stiff, he wanted to thank her again, he was concerned about infection. But Luna wasn't fooled. He came because he wanted to see her, and despite every rational thought in her head, she looked forward to his visits. Tell me about your work, he said on the 5th day, settling into the chair she'd begun keeping beside her table just for him. Luna glanced around the empty tent. Not much to tell. People get hurt. I fix them as best I can. That's not what I mean. His voice was patient, coaxing. Tell me why you chose this life. What drives you to heal? No one had ever asked her that before. Luna found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to answer. Because I know what it feels like to hurt and have no one help you. The words came out raw, unguarded. I know what it's like to be alone and afraid and bleeding. If I can spare someone else that feeling, even for a moment. She trailed off, realizing she'd revealed more than intended. Kieran leaned forward slightly, his full attention focused on her. You weren't always a healer, he said. Before your grandmother died, what were you? Luna's throat tightened. Just a girl, a stupid, naive girl who thought the world was safe. What happened to her, that girl? The question hit deeper than any physical wound. Luna turned away, busying herself with organising supplies that were already perfectly arranged. She learned better, she said finally. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle as silk. I don't think she disappeared entirely. I see her sometimes in the way you smile when you think no one is watching, in how carefully you touch injured things, as if you can heal them just by being gentle enough. Luna's breath caught. She kept her back to him, afraid of what her face might reveal. That girl, Kieran continued, she's still in there, still soft and brave and worth protecting. You don't know anything about me. The words came out sharper than intended, defensive. Then tell me, help me know you. Luna turned, meeting his steady gaze. Why? Because you matter to me. We barely know each other. Time isn't always the measure of connection, Luna. Some things you recognise immediately. The golden warmth pulsed between them, stronger now. Luna pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat accelerate. I should change your bandage, she said weakly. It doesn't need changing. We both know that. They looked at each other across the small space of the tent. Luna could hear her own breathing, could feel the pull in her chest like a tide drawing her towards shore. "I heard something interesting in the village yesterday," Kieran said, his tone carefully casual. Luna stiffened. "Oh?" "Rumours about the Alpha King. They say he's been travelling the outer territories, visiting border settlements." "The Alpha King never comes this far out," Luna said automatically. "We're too small, too unimportant." "Perhaps, or perhaps he's searching for something, someone." Luna's blood went cold. She'd heard whispers about an unmarked Alpha King, still seeking his mate well past the usual age. Stories of a powerful shifter who could command loyalty from any pack, who could end wars with a word, who was said to be waiting for the one woman who could stand as his equal. Fairy tales, stories to entertain children and romantic girls. "Every unmated alpha thinks he's special," she said dismissively. "I'm sure the king is no different." Kieran smiled, but something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or secrets. "I'm sure you're right," he agreed easily. "Still, it makes one wonder, what kind of woman would catch the attention of the most powerful man in the kingdom?" Luna shrugged, turning back to her herbs. "Someone worthy of him, someone with status and education and beauty. Everything I'm not." "You're wrong." The quiet certainty in his voice made her hands still. "You're wrong about yourself, Luna, about your worth, about what you have to offer." She closed her eyes, fighting against the warmth his words kindled in her chest. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." Luna shook her head. How could she tell him about that night? About cowering in the cellar while her family screamed above? About emerging to find their bodies torn apart by rogues? About the way the royal guards had looked at her with pity when they finally arrived too late? How could she explain that she'd spent 5 years believing that if she'd been stronger, braver, more worthy, somehow she could have saved them? "Some things can't be explained," she said finally, "and some things don't need to be." Luna felt him rise from the chair, heard his footsteps approach. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're safe with me, Luna, always." The words were a promise, spoken with such quiet conviction that something deep in her chest cracked open. Luna turned slowly, looking up into those storm-grey eyes. "I don't know how to be safe with anyone," she whispered. "You don't have to know. You just have to let me prove it to you." They stood there in the fading afternoon light, the space between them charged with possibility and fear, and the golden thread that pulsed stronger with each passing day. Luna wanted to step closer, wanted to let herself believe in his promises. Instead, she stepped back. "Your wound is healed," she said, the words falling like stones between them. "You don't need to come back." Something shifted in Kieran's expression, not hurt exactly, more like understanding mixed with gentle determination. "Need and want are different things, Luna." He moved toward the tent opening, then paused. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said without turning around, "and the day after, however long it takes." "For what?" "For you to understand that you're worth waiting for." Then he was gone, leaving Luna alone with the lingering scent of pine and leather and the impossible promise echoing in her ears. She sank onto her stool, pressing both hands to her chest where the golden warmth burned like a small sun. Worth waiting for. No one had ever thought she was worth anything at all. Luna was grinding valerian root when the horns sounded. The low ceremonial notes echoed across the village, making her hands still on the pestle. Those weren't the sharp warning blasts that signalled danger. These were formal announcements, the kind that preceded royal processions or official proclamations. Her assistant Mary burst through the tent flap, eyes wide with excitement. "Luna! You have to come see! The royal guard is here, hundreds of them, and banners flying the king's colours." Luna's stomach dropped. "The king? The Alpha King himself! Can you believe it? Here in our little village!" Mary grabbed Luna's arm, tugging toward the tent opening. Everyone's gathering in the square. Come on! Luna resisted, fear clawing at her throat. I should stay here, in case anyone gets injured in the crowd. Don't be silly. When will we ever see royalty again? Mary's grip tightened. Please, Luna, just for a few minutes. Against her better judgment, Luna allowed herself to be dragged from the safety of her tent. The village square was packed with people, all craning their necks toward the main road where dust clouds marked the approach of the procession. Luna hung back at the edge of the crowd, pulling her plain brown cloak tighter around her shoulders. She felt exposed here, vulnerable in a way that made her skin crawl. Too many people, too much noise, too much attention focused in one direction. The procession rounded the bend, and Luna's breath caught. She'd heard stories about the Alpha King's guard, but seeing them was something else entirely. Hundreds of mounted warriors in gleaming armour, their horses stepping in perfect formation. Banners snapped in the wind, bearing the royal crest of a silver wolf beneath a crown of stars. And at the centre of it all, riding a massive black destrier, was the Alpha King himself. Even at a distance, power radiated from him like heat from a forge. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man who'd never doubted his right to command, surveying the crowd with sharp attention. The late afternoon sun caught the dark gold of his hair, and when he turned his head to acknowledge the village elder's bow, Luna's world tilted off its axis. Storm-grey eyes, strong jaw, the same broad shoulders she'd been tending for a week. Kieran, the man who'd brought her tea and listened to her stories and promised to wait for her, was the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. The man she'd been slowly, carefully, terrifyingly beginning to trust was so far above her station that speaking to him was probably treason. Luna stepped backward, desperate to escape before he saw her. Before those sharp eyes found her in the crowd and she had to face the impossibility of what had been growing between them. But it was too late. Their gazes met across the square, and the golden bond flared so bright she gasped aloud. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by something that might have been relief. He said something to the guard beside him, never breaking eye contact with Luna. She turned and ran. Luna pushed through the crowd, ignoring Mary's confused calls, and fled toward the forest. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she crashed through the undergrowth, branches catching at her cloak and hair. She ran until her lungs burned, until the sounds of the village faded behind her, until she reached the small clearing by the river where she'd come to think as a child. Only then did she stop, falling to her knees beside the water and pressing her hands to her face. The Alpha King. Gods above and below, Kieran was the Alpha King. Everything made sense now. The quality of his clothes, the way he carried himself, the impossible speed with which he healed, the intensity of his focus on her, as if she were a puzzle he was determined to solve. He'd been studying her, playing with her, amusing himself with the broken healer girl while he passed through her insignificant village. Luna. She spun, scrambling backward as Kieran, no, the king, emerged from the tree line. He'd shed the formal trappings of royalty, but she could still see it in every line of his body. The absolute authority, the contained power that could reshape kingdoms with a word. Don't! She held up a hand as he stepped closer. Don't come near me. He stopped immediately, hands visible at his sides. Let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for a week? Luna's voice cracked with betrayal and fear. That you've been playing games with the village healer for your own entertainment? That's not what this was. Then what? She struggled to her feet, putting the fallen log between them like a barrier. What possible reason could the Alpha King have for pretending to be just another wounded traveller? Kieran's jaw tightened. Because I needed to know you, the real you, without the influence of a crown. Know me? Luna laughed, high and bitter. I'm nobody, a broken girl with nothing to offer anyone, let alone... She gestured helplessly at him. This. You. You're wrong. I'm right. Look at me. Luna spread her arms wide, her voice rising with desperation. I live alone in a healer's cottage. I have no family, no status, no education beyond what my grandmother taught me. I own 3 dresses and spend my days stitching up farmers and travellers. What could someone like me possibly mean to someone like you? Kieran stepped closer, his expression gentle but implacable. You're my mate. The words hit her like a physical blow. Luna's knees nearly buckled. No! She shook her head frantically. No, that's impossible. Mates are equals, partners. I could never be your equal. The bond doesn't lie, Luna. His voice was quiet, certain. You felt it the first time we touched. The golden warmth, the pull in your chest. That's not attraction or chemistry. That's recognition. Your soul calling to mine. Luna pressed her hands to her ears. Stop! I've been searching for you for 10 years, visiting every settlement, every village, every corner of the kingdom, looking for the one woman who would make the world make sense again. Stop it! And when I found you tending my wounds with such gentle care, speaking to me like I was just a man instead of a title. Kieran's voice roughened with emotion. I knew I'd found my home. Luna was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. I can't be what you need. I'm damaged, Kieran, broken in ways that don't heal. Tell me. He knelt slowly, bringing himself to her eye level across the log. Tell me what broke you. My family. The words tore from her throat like shards of glass. 5 years ago. Rogues attacked while I was gathering herbs in the forest. I heard the screams and hid like a coward in the root cellar until everything went quiet. Kieran's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands clench into fists. When I finally came out, they were all dead. My parents, my little brother, my grandmother, torn apart like animals. Luna's voice dropped to a whisper. The royal guards arrived an hour later, said they'd been tracking the rogues but lost the trail. If I'd been braver, if I'd run for help instead of hiding, you would have died with them. I should have died with them. The anguish erupted from someplace deep inside her chest. What kind of mate hides while her family is murdered? What kind of Luna survives when everyone she loves doesn't? A smart one. Kieran's voice was steady, absolute. A brave one who chose survival over a meaningless death. Luna shook her head wildly. You don't understand. A true mate would have saved them. A worthy mate would have been strong enough, fast enough, powerful enough to make a difference. Instead, I cowered in the dirt while the people I loved most died screaming. Luna. Kieran rose slowly, never breaking eye contact. Those rogues were part of Morgaine's pack, 30 of the most vicious killers in the kingdom, led by an alpha who'd lost his sanity to bloodlust. My personal guard barely survived the battle when we finally cornered them 3 days later. You're lying. I don't lie to you, not anymore. He stepped around the log, moving with careful, deliberate movements. You were 16 years old, untrained and alone. Against 30 rogues, you did the only intelligent thing possible. You survived. I was weak. You were smart. There's a difference. Luna backed away until the river blocked her retreat. It doesn't matter, don't you see? Even if the bond is real, even if fate or destiny or whatever brought us together, I can't be your queen. I don't know how to be anything but a healer. Then be a healer. Kieran stopped just out of arm's reach. Be my healer, my mate, my equal in all the ways that matter. I'm not your equal. You're everything. The words rang with quiet conviction. You're the woman who tends wounded strangers without thought for payment, who shares her tea and her stories and her gentle strength, who looks at a king and sees just a man worth caring for. Luna's breath hitched. Kieran, you asked me once what I'd lost in the war. I lost my faith that there was still goodness in the world, that there were people who helped others just because it was right, that there was such a thing as a gentle heart in a world full of violence. His voice roughened. And then I found you. I can't do this. The words came out small and broken. I can't be what you need. What do you think I need? Luna gestured helplessly. Someone strong, confident, beautiful, someone who can stand beside a king without shame. I need you, Luna, exactly as you are, gentle and brave and kind and stubborn enough to argue with an alpha king when you think he's wrong. I'm not ready for this, she whispered, and the familiar words felt like surrender. Kieran's expression softened. Then we wait, however long you need. You're a king. You can't wait forever. Watch me. They stared at each other across the small distance that felt like an ocean. The golden bond pulsed between them, stronger now, as if their honesty had fed it somehow. Luna could feel the pull in her chest, the desperate want to close the space between them and let herself believe in the impossible. But fear held her frozen, fear of being found wanting, of failing him the way she'd failed her family, of reaching for something so far beyond her grasp that the fall would destroy what was left of her heart. I need time, she said finally. You have it. I need space to think. Whatever you need. Luna searched his face for signs of impatience, frustration, the kind of masculine anger that came from being denied. Instead, she found only steady patience and a love so deep it made her chest ache. Why? She whispered. Why are you willing to wait? Kieran smiled, and it was soft and sad and infinitely tender. Because you're worth it, Luna, even if you can't see it yet. The words followed her all the way back to the village, echoing in her mind as she slipped through the shadows to her cottage. Worth waiting for, worth the patience of a king. For the first time in 5 years, Luna dared to wonder if it might be true. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and careful distance. True to his word, Kieran, she still couldn't think of him as the king, not when he sat in her healing tent drinking tea like any other man, gave her space. He made no demands, issued no royal commands. Instead, he simply existed in her world with the same quiet patience he'd shown before she'd learned his true identity. The royal procession had moved on after 3 days, but he remained, staying, he claimed, to ensure the village's defences were adequate against future rogue attacks. Luna suspected the truth was simpler. He was waiting. For her. She watched him from her cottage window some mornings, seeing him work alongside the village men to reinforce the wooden palisade around the settlement. No arrogance, no standing aside while others laboured. Just a man with calloused hands helping to build something stronger. He's different than I expected, Mary said one afternoon, organising supplies while Luna ground herbs. The king, I mean. Father says he remembers every man's name, asks about their families, even helped old Henrik repair his roof yesterday. Luna's hands stilled on the mortar and pestle. Did he? Mother's half in love with him already. Says any man willing to climb on a roof to help a widower is worth his crown. Mary glanced at Luna sideways. He asks about you, you know. Luna's stomach fluttered. What does he ask? How you're feeling, if you're eating enough, whether you've been sleeping. Mary's voice gentled. He worries about you, Luna. Anyone can see it. Luna ducked her head, focusing intently on the chamomile flowers she was grinding. She'd been sleeping poorly, plagued by dreams of storm-grey eyes and promises she was too afraid to believe. He shouldn't waste his time worrying about me. Why? Mary's tone turned serious. Luna, I've watched you these past weeks. You've been different since he arrived. Lighter somehow, even with all the confusion. You laugh more. You hum while you work. It's like you're waking up from a long sleep. Before Luna could respond, shouts erupted from the village centre. Both women froze, listening to the sound of running feet and panicked voices. "Rogues!" someone screamed. "Rogues at the north gate!" Luna's blood turned to ice. Mary grabbed her arm, fear stark in her young face. "What do we do?" Luna's training kicked in, overriding her terror. "Get the emergency supplies. Set up triage in the back of the tent, away from the fighting. Boil water, prepare bandages." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "If anyone comes through that flap who isn't from this village, you run. Understand?" Mary nodded frantically and rushed to follow orders. Luna grabbed her heaviest cloak and headed for the tent opening, her healer's bag clutched tight in her hands. Outside, chaos reigned. Villagers ran in all directions, some toward the safety of their homes, others toward the commotion at the north gate. Luna could hear the clash of steel on steel, the snarls of shifted wolves, the battle cries of men fighting for their lives. She forced herself to move toward the sound, even as every instinct screamed at her to hide. People would be hurt. People would need help. That was what mattered. The first wounded came stumbling back from the fight, a young farmer with claw marks across his shoulder, bleeding freely but not fatally. Luna caught him before he collapsed, guiding him toward the healing tent. "How many?" she asked, pressing cloth to his wounds. "Dozen, maybe more," he gasped. Came out of nowhere, but the king. Gods above, Luna, you should see him fight, like something out of legend. Despite everything, pride swelled in her chest. Her mate was protecting these people, putting himself in danger for strangers who meant nothing to him politically, but everything to her personally. More wounded followed. Luna lost herself in the familiar rhythm of triage: assess, prioritize, treat, move on. Mary proved invaluable, keeping supplies organized and helping with the less serious injuries, while Luna focused on the critical cases. It was during the third wave of casualties that she heard Mary scream. Luna spun from the man she was stitching to see a massive rogue wolf burst through the tent flap, its eyes wild with bloodlust. Mary cowered behind an overturned table, and the wolf's attention fixed on her with predatory focus. Without thinking, Luna stepped between them. "No!" Her voice rang with authority she didn't know she possessed. "You want to hurt someone? Try me." The wolf's head swung toward her, lips pulling back to reveal yellowed fangs. Luna held her ground, even as terror clawed at her throat. In her peripheral vision, she could see Mary crawling toward the back exit. Good. At least someone would survive. The rogue gathered itself to leap, muscles coiling like springs. Luna closed her eyes and thought of storm-grey eyes and gentle hands and promises to wait. She'd never gotten the chance to tell Kieran that she was ready to try. The killing blow never came. Instead, Luna heard the most terrifying sound she'd ever experienced, a roar of pure alpha fury that shook the tent poles and made her bones ache. She opened her eyes to see a massive silver wolf colliding with the rogue in mid-leap, both animals crashing into the tent wall with enough force to shake the whole structure. The fight was brutal and brief. The silver wolf, Kieran, even in shifted form, she could feel the bond thrumming between them, was larger, stronger, and infinitely more controlled. Within moments the rogue lay still, its neck snapped clean. Kieran shifted back to human form in a ripple of power, not seeming to care about his nakedness as he crossed the tent in 3 quick strides. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her frantically, checking for injuries. "Luna, answer me. Are you hurt?" "No, The words died in her throat as the reality hit her. She'd almost died. That rogue would have torn her apart if Kieran hadn't arrived when he did. But more than that, she'd stepped between a monster and an innocent girl without hesitation. The same girl who'd hidden in a cellar while her family was slaughtered had thrown herself in harm's way to protect someone else. "I didn't run." The words came out wondering, amazed. Kieran's hands stilled on her face. "What?" "I didn't run." Luna looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "When it came for Murray, I didn't hide. I stepped in front of it." Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Pride mixed with fierce protectiveness, and love so intense it took her breath away. "You were magnificent," he said roughly, "brave and strong and everything I knew you were." I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, love. It's acting despite the fear. His thumbs brushed away her tears. "You saved that girl's life." Luna looked over at Mary, who was being comforted by her mother near the tent entrance, alive because Luna had found the strength to stand instead of cower. "I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago," she whispered. No, Kieran agreed softly. You're not. You're stronger, braver, more compassionate. His voice dropped. You're exactly who you were always meant to be. Luna studied his face in the lamplight, the sharp cheekbones, the storm-grey eyes that saw her more clearly than she saw herself, the mouth that spoke promises he actually kept. I'm scared of needing someone, she admitted, the words barely audible. Need isn't weakness, Luna. It's trust. And trust. His hands tightened gently on her face. Trust is a gift, the most precious thing you could ever give someone. Around them, the sounds of battle were fading, shouts of victory, not panic. The rogues had been defeated, the village saved, but Luna barely heard any of it over the sound of her own heartbeat. Tell me about your wounds, she said suddenly. Kieran blinked, clearly not expecting the change of subject. What wounds? The ones that made you so patient with me, the losses that taught you to wait instead of demand. Luna reached up to touch his face. Tell me what broke you before you learned to heal. For a moment, Kieran was quiet. Then, still holding her gaze, he began to speak. I lost my parents when I was 22, assassinated in their own bed by someone they trusted. His voice was steady, but Luna could hear the old pain beneath it. My sister died trying to save them, threw herself between my mother and a silver blade, died in my arms an hour later. Luna's heart clenched. I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't the grief, it was the rage. Kieran's jaw tightened. For 2 years I was consumed by it, became the kind of alpha who ruled through fear, who solved every problem with violence. I thought strength meant never showing weakness, never admitting I needed anyone. What changed? An old pack healer. She told me that rage was just grief with nowhere to go, and that until I learned to grieve properly, I'd never be whole enough to recognize my mate when I found her. He smiled sadly. She said patience wasn't about waiting, it was about loving someone enough to let them heal at their own pace. Luna felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but opening like a flower turning towards sunlight. I'm not healed, she whispered. I may never be completely healed. Neither am I. Kieran's thumbs traced her cheekbones. But maybe we can be broken together. Maybe we can help each other find the missing pieces. For the first time since learning his identity, Luna allowed herself to really look at him. Not the king, not the impossible match, but the man who'd sat in her tent for weeks asking nothing more than to know her, who'd learned patience through his own pain and offered it freely to help her through hers. I want to try, she said, the words barely more than breath. Kieran's entire face transformed. Luna! I'm still scared. I still don't understand how this can work, but I want to try. We'll figure it out together. He pressed his forehead against hers. One day at a time, one moment at a time, whatever you need. Luna closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to lean into his strength. Around them, the village celebrated their victory, but all she could hear was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the quiet promise in his voice. For the first time in 5 years, Luna thought she might actually deserve to be happy. 2 months later, Luna found herself standing outside the royal tent at sunset, her heart hammering against her ribs. The village had settled into a peaceful rhythm since the rogue attack. Kieran had remained, officially overseeing the strengthening of border defences, but Luna knew the real reason. He was waiting, still, always waiting with that infinite patience that both humbled and terrified her. They'd grown closer in the weeks since she'd said she wanted to try. Shared meals, quiet conversations, moments of comfortable silence that felt more intimate than any touch. But Luna had held back from the final step, from truly accepting what the bond meant. Tonight, that changed. She pushed through the tent flap without announcing herself, something that would have been unthinkable months ago. Kieran looked up from the maps spread across his work table, candlelight casting shadows across his sharp features. Luna. Surprise and pleasure warmed his voice. Is everything all right? I need to tell you something. The words came out in a rush before she could lose her nerve. Kieran set down his quill immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Luna took a shaky breath, gathering courage. "I'm still not ready for everything. I may never be ready for crown ceremonies and court politics and being the kind of queen who knows how to navigate royal intrigue." Something flickered in Kieran's expression, but he remained silent, waiting. "But I'm ready to try. With you." Luna stepped closer, close enough to see the hope kindle in his storm-grey eyes. "I'm ready to choose this. Choose us. Luna." His voice was rough with emotion. "I love you." The words fell between them like a benediction. Not the king, not the alpha, not the mate bond. You, the man who brings me tea and listens to my stories and helps old Henrik fix his roof. The man who's patient enough to wait for a broken healer to remember how to trust. Kieran rose slowly from his chair, never breaking eye contact. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." They stood facing each other across the small space, the golden bond humming between them like a living thing. Luna could feel it pulling at her chest, urging her forward, but this time she didn't resist. "Kiss me," she whispered. Kieran crossed the distance between them in 2 steps, his hands framing her face with reverent care. When his lips touched hers, the world exploded into golden warmth. This wasn't like the careful, hesitant kisses they'd shared before. This was claiming and surrender and recognition all at once. The bond snapped into place with such intensity that Luna gasped against his mouth, feeling something fundamental shift in her very soul. "Gods!" Kieran breathed against her lips. "Luna, I can feel—" "Everything," she finished, wonder colouring her voice. "I can feel everything." It was true. Through the bond, she could sense his emotions as clearly as her own. Love so deep it ached, relief that she was finally, truly his, fierce protectiveness that would move mountains to keep her safe, and underneath it all, a steady patience that promised he would wait forever if she needed him to. "Is this what it's supposed to feel like?" Luna asked, her hands clutching his shoulders. "Exactly like this." Kieran's thumbs traced her cheekbones. "Complete, like finding the missing half of your soul." Luna understood now why the old texts called it a golden thread. She could feel it binding them together, stronger than marriage vows, deeper than human love. This was destiny made manifest, fate written in starlight and sealed with choice. "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly nervous again. "Now we make it official." Kieran's smile was soft and sure. "The mating ceremony, the formal claiming." Luna's stomach fluttered. "How does that work exactly?" "However you want it to work." Kieran's voice was gentle. "Grand ceremony in the capital with 1,000 witnesses, or something simple here in the village. Your choice, always." Luna thought of the ornate throne room she'd never seen, of nobles who would whisper about her low birth and humble origins. Then she thought of Mari and Henrik and all the villagers who'd welcomed their king as one of their own. "Here," she said firmly, "small and simple, with people who actually matter." "Perfect." Kieran pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "When?" "Tonight." The word surprised her as much as him. "If we're doing this, if I'm choosing this, I don't want to wait any longer. I've spent 5 years afraid of taking risks. I'm done being afraid." Kieran's entire face lit up. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." And she was. For the first time since learning his identity, Luna felt no doubt, no fear, just quiet certainty. "I want to be yours, Kieran, completely." Within an hour, the village square had been transformed. Someone had found wildflowers and evergreen boughs to create a simple altar. Candles flickered in the gathering darkness, and the entire population of the village had gathered to witness their alpha king claim his mate. Luna stood at the edge of the crowd, suddenly nervous again. She'd changed into her best dress, a simple blue gown that Mary's mother had insisted on pressing for the occasion. Nothing fancy, nothing royal, just Luna as she was. "You look beautiful," Mary whispered, squeezing her hand. "I look like a village healer in a borrowed dress," Luna replied, but without bitterness. She was what she was, and somehow, miraculously, that was enough. Kieran emerged from his tent wearing formal black leather and a silver circlet that marked his royal status. But when his eyes found hers across the square, he smiled with such warmth that all her nervousness melted away. This was right. This was home. The ceremony itself was simple. Elder Hartwell, who'd married couples in the village for 40 years, spoke the traditional words while Luna and Kieran stood beneath the canopy of flowers. But when it came time for the personal vows, Kieran surprised her. "Luna," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "You taught me that strength isn't about never being broken, it's about healing. You taught me that love isn't about possession, it's about patience. You are my mate, my equal, my queen, but most importantly, you're my home." Luna felt tears prick her eyes. When it was her turn to speak, the words came from somewhere deep in her heart. "Kieran, you found me when I was lost and waited while I remembered how to trust. You saw worth in a broken healer when I couldn't see it in myself. I choose you, not because fate says I should, but because you're the man who makes me want to be brave enough for love." The formal marking came next, Kieran's teeth at her throat, not breaking skin but leaving a mark that would tell the world she was claimed. When he pulled back, Luna could see her own mark blooming on his neck, the physical sign of their bond. "By the old laws and the new, by choice and by fate, you are mated," Elder Hartwell pronounced. "What the bond has joined, let no force tear asunder." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, but Luna barely heard them. She was lost in Kieran's eyes, in the feeling of completeness that filled every empty space in her heart. "Hello, my queen," he murmured, for her ears alone. "Hello, my king," she whispered back. They were led to the cottage that had been prepared for their wedding night. Not Luna's simple healer's quarters, but a larger dwelling that would serve as their temporary home until they decided where to build their future. Inside, candles cast dancing shadows on the walls, and someone had scattered flower petals on the bed. It was simple and sweet and perfectly them. "Are you nervous?" Kieran asked, closing the door behind them. Luna considered the question. A month ago the answer would have been yes, a week ago even. But now, with the bond humming contentedly between them and his love wrapping around her like warmth, she felt only anticipation. "No," she said, and realized it was true. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Kieran's smile was radiant. "So am I." He approached her slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Luna stepped forward to meet him halfway. When he pulled her into his arms, she went willingly, joyfully, ready to discover what it meant to be truly claimed. The night was tender and patient and perfect, just like the man who'd waited for her to remember she was worthy of love. And as Luna finally surrendered completely to the bond, to him, to the impossible future stretching before them, she understood that healing didn't mean forgetting the scars. It meant choosing to trust someone else to help carry them. In Kieran's arms, surrounded by his love and the golden warmth of their completed bond, Luna finally felt whole. 6 months later, Queen Luna stood in the royal healing centre she'd established in the capital, watching as young healers tended to a line of patients that stretched around the block. It still felt surreal sometimes, being called Your Majesty by people who genuinely meant it. But Luna had learned to wear her crown the same way she wore her healer's apron, as a tool for serving others, nothing more or less than that. "The waiting time is down to 2 hours," Mary reported, approaching with a ledger in her hands. Luna had brought her faithful assistant to the capital as her personal aide, and Mary had taken to royal administration like a duck to water. And the noble families have finally stopped complaining about common folk receiving the same quality care as their children. Luna smiled, remembering her first appearance at court 6 months ago. She'd been terrified, certain that every lord and lady would see through her to the village healer beneath the silk gowns. Instead, when she'd stood to address the nobility about establishing free healing centres throughout the kingdom, Her voice had rung clear and strong. Healthcare shouldn't depend on birth or wealth, she'd told them, her chin lifted with quiet authority. A farmer's child deserves the same chance to survive a fever as a duke's heir. This is not negotiable. There had been murmurs, protests about resources and tradition, but Kieran had simply looked at his counsel with raised eyebrows and asked, "Are there any questions about my Queen's directive?" The room had fallen silent. That was the moment Luna truly understood what it meant to be his equal. Not because she shared his bloodline or title, but because he trusted her judgment completely and backed her authority without question. "Your Majesty," a young voice interrupted her thoughts. Luna turned to see a group of village children who'd made the journey to the capital with their families, seeking treatment at the healing centre. The smallest, a girl no more than 6, with flowers braided into her dark hair, held out a handful of wildflowers. "For you, Queen Luna the healer," the child said solemnly. "Mamma says you fix people like the old hedge witch used to, but better." Luna knelt to accept the flowers, her heart swelling. "Thank you, sweetheart, these are beautiful." "Are you really magic?" another child piped up. "Tommy's Dar says you can heal anything." "Not magic," Luna said gently. "Just knowledge and practice, the same things you could learn if you wanted to." The children's eyes went wide with possibility, and Luna felt the familiar stirring of purpose. These children saw her not as a queen trying to play healer, but as a healer who happened to wear a crown. The distinction mattered more than she could express. After the children were led away by their grateful parents, Luna made her way through the palace corridors toward the private gardens. It was nearly evening, and she knew she'd find Kieran there, reviewing reports in the fading sunlight as was his habit. Sure enough, he sat on their favourite stone bench, papers scattered around him, his dark gold hair catching the last rays of sun. Even after months of marriage, the sight of him still made her pulse quicken. "Busy day at the healing centre?" he asked without looking up, that small smile playing at his lips. "The busiest yet, which is exactly what I hoped for." Luna settled beside him, automatically beginning to organise his scattered reports. It was a small intimacy they'd developed. She helped with his paperwork while they talked, her healer's methodical nature bringing order to his controlled chaos. "The council received 3 more requests today for healing centres in the outer provinces," Kieran said, finally setting aside his work to give her his full attention. "Lord Aldrich suggested we might be overextending our resources." Luna's jaw tightened. Lord Aldrich had been one of her most vocal critics from the beginning, convinced that a commoner queen would bankrupt the kingdom with her bleeding heart initiatives. "And what did you tell Lord Aldrich?" "That my queen's healing centres have reduced plague outbreaks by 60% in the regions where they've been established, which has increased productivity and tax revenue substantially." Kieran's smile turned sharp. "I also mentioned that healthy citizens make better soldiers, should he be concerned about our military strength." Luna laughed, leaning against his shoulder. "You're getting very good at translating compassion into language the council understands." "I'm learning from the best." Kieran pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "How do you do it, love? Face their scepticism every day and never lose that gentle strength?" Luna considered the question, watching the sun sink lower behind the palace walls. "I remember who I was before I met you, broken and afraid and convinced I had nothing to offer. If I can become someone worthy of wearing a crown, then anyone can heal from anything. My trauma gave me empathy. My healing skills gave me purpose. And you—" She turned to look at him. "You gave me the courage to believe I deserved both." Kieran's expression softened. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving the simple life for all this complexity?" It was a question he'd asked before, usually when the political pressures grew particularly intense. Luna understood his worry. He'd found his mate in a village healer's tent, and sometimes she caught him watching her during formal court functions with concern in his storm-grey eyes. "Never," she said firmly. I miss the simplicity sometimes, but I don't regret the choice. How can I when it means I can help thousands instead of dozens?" They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened around them, Luna's head on Kieran's shoulder while he absently played with her hair. These quiet moments had become precious, islands of peace in their increasingly busy lives. "I have something to tell you," Luna said eventually, nervous butterflies taking flight in her stomach. "Oh?" Kieran's hand stilled in her hair. Luna sat up, turning to face him fully. "I've been feeling different lately, tired in the mornings, emotional over small things. At first I thought it was just the stress of court life, but—" Understanding dawned in Kieran's expression. "Luna, I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush of joy and terror. "About 2 months along, I think." For a moment Kieran just stared at her. Then his face transformed with such radiant happiness that Luna's breath caught. "A baby," he whispered, his hands moving to frame her face. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Luna asked, suddenly needing reassurance. "I know we hadn't talked about timing, and with everything happening with the kingdom—" "Happy?" Kieran laughed, the sound rich with emotion. "Luna, I'm ecstatic. You're going to be the most incredible mother." Relief flooded through her. "I was terrified to tell you. What if I can't balance being a mother and a queen and a healer? What if I fail at all of it?" "You won't fail." Kieran's voice carried absolute conviction. "You'll probably drive yourself to exhaustion trying to do everything perfectly, which means I'll have to be very creative about making you rest. But fail? Never." Luna smiled, some of the anxiety easing. "A healer queen mother. Think the nobles will survive the scandal?" "If they don't, we'll heal them back to health and make them deal with it anyway." Kieran pulled her close, his hands splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you beyond reason?" "Only every day," Luna replied, settling back against his chest. "But I don't mind hearing it again." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, planning for their child and their kingdom's future, Luna reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been a broken healer who believed she was worth nothing to anyone. Now she was a queen, a wife, a healer to thousands, and soon to be a mother. The scared girl who'd hidden in a cellar while her family died was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she no longer defined Luna's limits. Instead, that girl's survival had become the foundation of a queen's strength. "Do you think our child will be a healer?" Luna asked drowsily. "With your bloodline and my stubbornness? Probably a healer who thinks they can fix the entire world single-handedly." "Sounds perfect," Luna murmured, and meant it. Later that night, as they lay in their marriage bed with Luna curled against Kieran's side, she thought about the young healers she was training and the healing centres spreading across the kingdom. About the child growing beneath her heart who would be raised to understand that true strength came from service, not power. She thought about the golden thread that had connected her to this impossible man, this patient king who'd seen worth in a village healer when she couldn't see it herself. The bond still hummed between them, warm and constant as a heartbeat, but now it felt less like fate and more like choice renewed every day. "Kieran?" she whispered in the darkness. Thank you for waiting." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for being worth the wait." Outside their window, the capital city slept peacefully, protected by a king who understood that true power meant lifting others up, and guided by a queen who'd learned that healing yourself was the first step toward healing the world. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed Luna and Kieran's story of patience, healing, and finding love when you're ready for it, please subscribe for more stories like this one. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales of hope and happy endings we all need sometimes.